Hello, welcome to Dharma Night. We've got a few people who haven't been to this particular evening at the Buddhist Centre before, so nice to have you. Welcome. My name is Amara Chandra, but Amara is a good start. Oh, there's a seat at the front. No, you don't. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks.
No problem.
Sorry I'm late.
No, don't. You're hardly late. I've been much later than that. Hilarious but true. So we've got a really lovely night tonight. We've got Rebecca and Allan, and they're going to talk about why I am a Buddhist. And well, I end up thinking about this myself as I start to sort of think about the night and sort of think about setting it up. I think why I am a Buddhist. Why am I a Buddhist? But I've been turning this over a little bit, and I must admit, I'm so glad I'm a Buddhist. I feel like at the moment, how would I be in the world if I didn't have the Metta Bhavana practice? If I didn't have a practice that could help me hold compassion in my heart in a really open, big way, how would I be if I didn't have that sort of, if I wasn't slightly bigger as a human being, had a kind of bigger sense of who I am that can hold difficulties that are sort of in the world, and my own personal difficulties as well, to be able to hold the highs and the lows, to be able to hold the suffering and just let it be there without being overwhelmed by it, and without getting so involved in it, feeling like I need to know everything, but just being able to hold suffering a bit lightly. And I feel like I was thinking, oh, and I think there's some wisdom in there. Yes, it's been years. But I feel like there's a level of wisdom that I've acquired from that practice, which I wouldn't, I'm not going to walk around and claim sort of great transcendental wisdom. But yeah, actually, my practice over the years means that I do hold things with my heart a bit more open and a bit more broad, but with that the Buddhist perspective gives me some wisdom. It's not my wisdom, it's just that I have a bit more perspective on things. There's a bit more wisdom in my approach and in my way of being in the world. So at the moment, I sort of think, gosh, imagine if I wasn't a Buddhist. Imagine what sort of, where would I be in my life and in the world? Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Rebecca and Allan, and I really thank them as well for giving this talk, because it's a bit of a thing, isn't it, to sort of talk about why you're a Buddhist, because there's something about commitment, making a commitment to something, and be willing to sort of stand with your sort of sense of conviction or belief, or at least where you are now, and be able to sort of talk from that and sort of to put it a bit on the line, to show yourself in that way, to sort of say, oh yeah, no, I'm a Buddhist. I remember when I was, exploring Buddhism, and people would sort of say, oh, what are you doing on the weekend? It's like, I'm going on the street. So, pardon? Going on retreat. Oh, what sort of retreat is that? It's a Buddhist retreat. Please don't ask me any questions. And then getting more and more confident to sort of say, oh yeah, going on a Buddhist retreat, and feeling like, yeah, maybe I'm a Buddhist. I'm kind of nearly a Buddhist. And then slowly feeling like, oh yeah, I'm a Buddhist. Yeah, and I can just say it with confidence. So I think there's a kind of integration that happens when you can sort of talk and sort of talk, not talk, when you sort of say out loud what's sort of going on inside, I guess. I was, I was exploring Buddhism. Oh, was I a Buddhist? Would I dare say it? What if, what if somebody asked me a question? What would I be able to say? But it didn't really matter in the end. I sort of felt like, oh yeah, I wanted to say I was a Buddhist. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to just hearing what your explorations are of that. Yeah. Yeah. So Rebecca is going to go first. Thank you for that. So I'll leave you up here. I don't know if everyone knows Rebecca. She comes on a Thursday night a bit more often. You see you sometimes on a okay, sometimes she does.
It's a bit.
She doesn't
go at the moment,
but she's here with the sub 30 slash 35 with the 30 with the sort of the young Buddhists. I don't know what to call it. Anyhow, key person, linchpin. So with that, so that's really great. Yeah. So welcome. Thank you, Rebecca.
To think about what we learned in the first half of the session, get myself all set up, posture, go. Thank you, Chandra, for that introduction. I can definitely relate to kind of having to grow into calling myself a Buddhist. Actually, when I first started calling myself a Buddhist, I would call myself a baby Buddhist. That's what I would say. I would be like, well, I'm really new. I'm just fresh, just kind of come out into the world of Buddhism. But now I really am starting to call myself a Buddhist, even to people at work, which is still a bit uncomfortable, but yeah, it feels right. And when I was asked to give this talk, I thought it would be really easy. I was like, yeah, I'm a Buddhist. No worries. I'll just say whatever comes to mind. And then this weekend I was like, no, I should prep. And I actually just became really overwhelmed with how many things I had to say. And also became overwhelmed with the task of putting them down, like onto paper, because I realized that a lot of how I decided to become a Buddhist was like through kind of the heart, through feeling, and so I'd never had to put it into words, and especially not into a coherent talk that actually like makes sense. So we'll see how this turns out. But when I was going through this exercise of trying to put all of my thoughts onto paper, I remembered this, I would say quote. It's not really a quote. It's like a whole talk, really. This talk that I heard probably 4 years ago now, before I had any contact with Buddhism. And I'm going to read it in a bit. I'm going to talk a bit about other stuff first. And the reason this talk was kind of coming into my mind is because what I was trying to put onto paper was, well, how did I get from where I was 5 or 10 years ago to the point of calling myself a Buddhist? Because actually it's quite a shift. So I used to be just like kind of a staunch atheist, like, yeah, okay, everything's about, I was very materialistic, everything was about science and rationalism, and I'm sure that kind of is how a lot of people who show up here feel. I don't think it's a very unique kind of trajectory. And I'm like, boy, how did I get from being this like very science-oriented person to being someone who's open to things like ritual, to things like myth, to things like yeah, listening to my heart. All sounds very gooey, doesn't it? And one of the things that that brought me from point A to point B was going through a difficult time, which I think is probably something that also a lot of people can relate to who show up at the Buddhist Centre. So I had this kind of period of my life that I labeled the crisis period. Kind of hard to tell when it began, when it ended, but definitely happened. And as I was coming out of this crisis period, I listened to this talk that I'm going to read an excerpt from. It's by a guy named David Foster Wallace, who was an American writer. And in this particular case, he was giving a commencement address to a group of university students. And he says something in there. He says, no one is an atheist. Everybody worships. And yeah, when I heard this, after the series of events that I'd gone through in my life, it really struck a chord with me, because the worldview that I'd started with pre-crisis was one where it was very much based on anxiety. I was very much worried about just kind of like surviving, just making it through the next day. And it was a very self-centered worldview. I was always in competition with other people, never really trying to connect with people, always just trying to kind of take care of myself and fight for myself. I was very into science. I was very into my studies and academia, and yeah, being good at that. And that was a big part of my personality. And something else that I did, unfortunately, was also really buy into beauty standards that are kind of just shoved down young women's throats all day, every day from day one. So that was worldview. And I knew that these things had gotten me absolutely nowhere. It took me a long time to realize that, but they basically just got me into, crisis era. Yeah, and then I heard this talk. So now I'm going to read the excerpt from David Foster Wallace's talk. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship is that pretty much anything else will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, then you will never have enough, never feel you have enough. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they grieve you. Worship power, you will end up feeling weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, and always on the verge of being found out. But the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful, it's that they're unconscious. They are default settings. And the so-called real world will not discourage you from operating on the default settings, because the so-called real world moves merrily along in a pool of fear, anger, and frustration, and craving and worship of self. Our present culture has harnessed these forces in ways that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom to be lords of our own tiny skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. This kind of freedom has much to recommend to it. But of course, there are other kinds of freedom, and the kind that is most precious you will not hear much talk about in the great outside world of wanting and achieving. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline, and being able to truly care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad petty, unsexy ways every day. Yeah, so I heard that. This guy's not a Buddhist, by the way. Actually, at other points in this talk, he kind of snubs Buddhism a bit. But it all sounds like quite Buddhist to me in certain ways. And when I heard this talk, it really just gelled with my personal experience. I was just like, wow, yeah, here I've been all these years calling myself an atheist, thinking that like I've got it all figured out, and I'm being completely rational. But what I've been doing is I've been worshiping. I've been worshiping intellect. I've been worshiping kind of, you know, beauty and body and those sorts of things. And I've been just, yeah, I've just been grasping onto all these things kind of in this desperate search for some sort of meaning, you know. It's like, why am I here? Just tell me what I'm supposed to do, you know, in the so-called real world, as David Foster Wallace says, will tell you, yeah, okay, here's what you do. You go and you be really successful at the job, or, you know, you're supposed to be really beautiful, or, you know, and he creates, you know, capitalism creates all of these things that we're supposed to do. But in the end, it leaves us quite empty. And so I realized that emptiness. And coming out of this period, this difficult period where I'd realized kind of the error in my ways, I'd come up with some new things, some new priorities. And those priorities were, number one, I wanted to get in touch with myself. So I felt that I'd been living kind of in a way that was for, modern culture or something, just doing what kind of modern culture says we should all do. Not that I was helping anyone in the process of that. I wasn't helping myself, wasn't helping anyone else. And priority number two was, I wanted to be in contact with other people. I wanted meaningful friendships, and I wanted to be kind of part of a community, which I'd never been. And that all could have gone any sort of wild direction, anything could have happened. But during this period of my life where I was kind of looking for a new way to live, I kind of, I went online to do some online dating. And it was pretty miserable for the most part. But just as I was about to completely give up, I met this really cute guy. He was really sweet. And he also happened to be an ordained Buddhist, which was weird, but I was willing to go along with it because he was so nice. But yeah, that's kind of how I came into contact with Buddhism. And it was slow at first. It was kind of a spectator's view at first. I was watching, I was observing. But what I observed was really, really compelling. It made a lot of sense to me. And eventually I dared to dip my toes in the water and came along to a meditation class. And yeah, it just kept making sense. And that's basically what happened, is it just kept making sense. And it also kept it kept feeling right. Yeah. And when I think back to those priorities that I'd set for myself, priority of getting to know myself, and the priority of connecting to other people, then Buddhism like checks the box, it like checks the box like 500 times. Like, I've learned so much about myself. I've been learning about my mind, been learning about my habits. I've been feeling a bit more ownership over my life because of that. Unfortunately, I don't read much, but one of the Dharma books I've read by Ayakema said, she says over and over again, you're the owner of your own karma. And I think about that all the time, and it's really scary, but it's really empowering. So I love this feeling of feeling ownership over my own life. Yeah. and yeah, getting connected with other people. I mean, that's yeah, I've just been blown away really by becoming part of the Sangha. It's been, yeah, so much more than I bargained for. And I think that that's not an accident. You know, it's easy to say, oh, you know, we all show up here and we all probably have like the same values and same politics, and of course we get along. But no, it's also just Buddhism, right? It teaches us how to skillfully communicate with people. It teaches us the importance of friendship. It teaches us the metabhavana practice and lots of practices to generate, you know, positive emotion towards each other. And so, yeah, it's just really powerful for creating community. And I had like one more thing to go into, but I want to make sure Allan has enough time. And so that's kind of wrapping it up. Yeah, I guess if I had to summarize, I am a Buddhist because I want to, you know, I want to live my life. I want to know who I am, even though that's probably, you know, it's definitely not fixed, but, you know who I am in each moment and watch myself grow and watch myself learn. And I want to do that with other people who are doing the same thing. So there we go.
Oh, wow.
Thank you. Right.
Thank you. Thank you. That was absolutely gorgeous.
Aww.
Oh, yeah. Oh, what a gift. My heart is just like on bang. Yeah, it's really lovely. Yeah, and thank you for making yourself vulnerable like that. Yeah, really appreciate that whole sort of journey that you've mapped out, and that wonderful quote, we all worship something. What am I going to worship? Allan, I'm going to So I'll give you a wave at 14.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Amrichandra. Thank you, Rebecca, for setting the stage and giving a wonderful talk. Yeah. One question I actually sort of wrote down at the beginning when I was writing this talk is, did I become a Buddhist? Like, was there a point before when I wasn't a Buddhist and then I was, or was I sort of always a Buddhist and I just sort of have been feeling my way towards that? I don't know if that's just like being overly pedantic or if that's actually a thing worth pondering, but I thought I'd throw that in as an interesting question. So yeah, I guess I'll talk through how I came to believe, to feel that I was a Buddhist and why I still am a Buddhist. When I started reflecting on this, I started thinking about sort of earlier years. I remember particularly high school years of just this real yearning of like, this is so boring. There must be something more. University, when I go to university, that's when things will be. I had these like visions, these almost like rose-tinted visions of the future of university. It's going to be all these meaningful friendships and yeah, it's just going to be so meaningful, and that's when things are really going to be good. And there was always just this sense of like, and then I'll be happy, and then I'll be happy, and then I'll be happy. Just really wanting meaning. I feel like when I look back, that's what I was looking for. Just wanted to be part of something meaningful, because I was brought up without any sense of religion or higher purpose, and it's fine. You can go to university and get a good job and make money and have a family and stuff, but what's left here? So I went to university. I did not have those wonderful experiences. Well, thanks very much. Well, I had some nice experiences. It's all a mix of good and bad, but there was a lot of staying up late, drinking, some things I would mention if Jeremy didn't have a camera on me. A lot of like failed relationships, because that was another place where I thought I would find lots of meaning and would be relationships, and the answer was always seemed to be a girlfriend, and it never was. And yeah, I was working a lot in university. I didn't really know how to manage stress. I was working part-time, and stress kept building and building and building. And like Rebecca, there was a critical period. I can't remember, how did you phrase it? There was a difficult time. And I liked what you were saying, like, I don't know when it started, I don't know when it ended, but it definitely happened. And there was certainly like around the 2020 lockdown was when that got particularly bad. And just after I moved flat for my beginning of the academic year at uni, I started meditating again. I came across meditation actually in school. There was a teacher that did a week's mindfulness course. I didn't really get anything deeper meaningful from it, but it put it on the radar as a thing. And when I was working, I tried like Headspace and stuff to help with sleep. So it was on my radar as a thing, and I started meditating. Actually, I managed to meditate every day for several months, I think, for a good stretch of my final year of undergraduate. And I really noticed a big difference just in my own mental states. It wasn't very integrated, but I felt a lot of the stuff up here that was making my life awful, to be honest. Really, it helped enormously with that. I went to see a therapist briefly who actually, in a weird sort of cosmic turn of fate, used to be an order member, who turned me on to some audiobooks. I found out his order name recently from doing some archaeology in the library. So I managed to work it all out. But he turned me on to just like audiobooks and Buddhist psychology. And there was one that I listened to, the Roots of Buddhist Psychology by Jack Cornfield. And that was great. It just really clicked and it all sort of made sense at this intellectual level. And that set me on a path of listening to lots of Dharma talks, usually in bed, and like it was a nice thing to fall asleep to a good Dharma talk. And yeah, there was this sort of intellectual understanding, but it hadn't really deeply set in. I wasn't there 100%. Things had been set in motion, but I still liked drinking lots and not being very mindful a lot of the time. I think, my communication with my parents is one example where, things weren't integrated, and loving kindness seemed like, in an abstract sense, that was great. I really sort of resonated with that, but it wasn't a practice that I actively took up. And then just last summer, I moved to Cambridge. I was living in Glasgow and I got offered a job down here, so I came down. Yeah, and actually within a weekend being in Cambridge, I was out drinking nonsense as usual, and I was actually assaulted. I heard some Scottish accents and went and said hello, and they were not very friendly. They got caught and they were charged. I got a reasonably healthy sum, but the next day I was rattled and I just naturally found myself, I reached for the Dhammapada and I read out loud some of the opening verses. They abused me, they beat me, they defeated me, they robbed me. In those who harbour such thoughts, hatred will never cease. They abused me, they beat me, they defeated me, they robbed me. And those who do not harbour such thoughts, hatred will cease. For hatred does not cease by hatred at any time. Hatred ceases by love. This is an old rule. Sangharakshita, the founder of Triratna, who many people here consider to be their spiritual teacher, talks about going for refuge as the central defining act of being a Buddhist, what makes one a Buddhist. Going for refuge to the Buddha, to the Dharma, to the Sangha. And looking back when I was writing this talk, I realized that that's probably my definitive act of going for refuge. It wasn't just I think it evoked something about the quality of what going for refuge is. It wasn't just nice words that I said to make me feel better, although it did have a really positive effect. It spoke to something far deeper than that. But I still wouldn't have described myself as a Buddhist, but I think by that point I was a Buddhist and just hadn't come to admit it yet. So after moving to Cambridge, I thought it'd be quite easy to get my meditation practice going again, and it surprisingly wasn't. So I went and looked for meditation classes and came down here. Actually late my first time coming down. Artist City let me in. I got here sort of just in time. When I was in Glasgow, actually I looked for meditation classes and came across the Glasgow Buddhist Centre. And I'm sort of ashamed to admit it, I was really put off by their website with a bunch of like older folk with cases. They have redone their website, I've checked. I might have turned up now. But I started coming along here, and yeah, there was just a nice friendly atmosphere that kept me coming along. I was in a new city, I didn't know anyone. It was a great place to make friends. And after a while, again, talking to Artist Izzy, I wish he was here to hear this talk. He's sort of, I owe an awful lot to him. Oh, it's being recorded. There you go. Make sure he watches it. Yeah, just talking to Artist Izzy on the tea break and talking about how just valuable I was finding being in the Sangha context of being in the community context. They said, oh, come along to one of the men's events. So I did, and at the end of that, Arthur said he was saying, oh yeah, some of us are going on retreat. He gave out flyers for the Padmaloka Great Gathering. This was back in February. I booked on without really like thinking about it much. And as the time drew nearer to it, I was like, do I actually want to go on this? I don't know. I was still very much like, I like meditating. I like pints, you know. There's a real sort of trade-off I had to make. Then I went on retreat, and honestly, the meditations were so. It was the first time I think I ever fell asleep during meditation was during one of the morning sits. My legs hurt. But then in the puja on Saturday night, I was completely moved to tears. It was just, there was something about it that all that yearning, all that longing for something had just been met directly, really directly in my heart. And I'd never felt anything like that before. And just since then, I've been in subsequent retreats and just had that same deep need that I didn't really know that I had, just being met wholeheartedly and fully. And it was around about that time that, I started to just confidently say that I was a Buddhist. It was like this sort of little stream had been flowing and flowing deeper and deeper, and then more and more of my being was going in this direction, but then my conception of who I was still over here. And actually, I think you were drawing this out earlier, just confidently coming over and saying, no, that is me. I am a Buddhist. This is how I want to live. That just felt, taking ownership, it felt like a simplification of this really complicated equation that had been going on, and it just boiled down to, yes, I'm a Buddhist. It's never really been the same since. So why am I still a Buddhist? I think also throughout my life, I've been really sensitive to the suffering in the world. See things in the news and stuff, and I've always just felt responsiveness and wanting to do that, to do something about it and make the world a better place. The Glasgow University slogan while I was attending was "World Changers Welcome," and that made me feel awful. It really did. I felt like I was in university and like, what am I actually doing? What world changers welcome? I want to change the world, but like, how can I? What am I even doing? I'm studying a degree so that don't really like so that I can get a job and make money, and it just felt so meaningless. And since I've been practicing the Dharma, I just noticed the positive effects in my world. And when I'm at my best, I really do feel like that has a positive impact on other people. And I do have faith, and I use the word faith really deliberately, that by practicing the Dharma, that's the most effective way, the most direct way that I can impact the world in a positive way, and to make a positive impact and to help other people. I can't see a way that I could do that without the Dharma, without the Buddha, without the Sangha. So that's why I'm a Buddhist.